Millionaire took his daughter to the doctor and discovered the pediatrician was his ex-fiancée. Addison Henderson had learned to keep the past carefully locked away behind a flawless routine. At 32, she'd built a life that worked, predictable, controlled, safe. She started her mornings early, reviewing patient charts while holding a travel mug of coffee that had already gone lukewarm. Her white coat was always pressed, her light brown hair pulled back in a low ponytail, and she wore the kind of calm smile that put anxious parents at ease. The pediatric clinic where she worked sat on a quiet street in northeast Portland, the kind of neighborhood where coffee shops outnumbered chain stores and people still knew their mail carrier's name. The building itself was older. You could hear the pipes clanking when the heat kicked on, and there was a crack in the ceiling of exam room 2 that nobody had gotten around to fixing. But the walls were covered in bright murals of animals and rainbows, and the waiting room had a bin of toys that kids fought over while their parents filled out forms. Addison liked the imperfection of it, the realness. She lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment in the Hawthorne District, a third-floor walk-up with hardwood floors that creaked and windows that looked out over a street lined with maple trees. Her furniture was simple, a couch from IKEA, a coffee table she'd found at an estate sale, a bookshelf packed with medical journals and novels she never had time to read. There were plants on the windowsill, succulents mostly, the kind that didn't die if you forgot about them for a week. And in the back of her closet, there were 3 boxes she hadn't opened in years. She told herself she'd throw them out eventually. She never did. Her life looked balanced from the outside, maybe it even was. But there were stories she carried that had never really ended. They'd just stopped mid-sentence, leaving her to wonder how they might have finished. Simon Watson was the kind of man who controlled everything he could. At 41, he'd spent 2 decades building a logistics company that operated across the Pacific Northwest. Not flashy, not famous, but solid and profitable in the way that mattered to people who understood business. His days were scheduled down to 15-minute blocks, meetings, calls, reports. He drove a black BMW that he kept spotless, lived in a modern house in the West Hills with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that looked expensive because it was. He hadn't always been this way, controlled, careful. But 2 years ago, his wife died. A car accident on I-5 during a rainstorm, the kind of thing that happens fast and leaves no time for goodbyes. And he'd become a man who couldn't afford to let anything slip. He had a 6-year-old daughter to raise. He had a company to run. He had responsibilities. Lily was the center of everything now. She had her mother's dark curls and a gap between her front teeth that made her look younger than she was. She asked 1,000 questions a day and had opinions about everything. What shoes she'd wear, what songs they'd listen to in the car, whether dragons were real or just big lizards that people made up. Simon didn't know how to answer half of what she asked, but he tried. That was the best he could do. Try. They'd moved to Portland 6 months ago. New city, new start, fewer memories waiting around every corner. Simon had found a house with a backyard, enrolled Lily in a good school, and hired a nanny who picked her up every afternoon. He worked late most nights, but he made it home for dinner. He read to her before bed. He was there. That had to count for something. On a Thursday morning in early October, Lily woke up with a fever. Nothing serious, just a low-grade thing that made her cranky and tired, but Simon didn't take chances. He called his assistant, cleared his morning, and found the name of a pediatric clinic that had good reviews online. The kind of place that felt more like a neighborhood doctor's office than a corporate medical center. He didn't think much of it. Just another appointment, another box to check. The clinic's waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and crayons. There were kids everywhere. A toddler stacking blocks in the corner, a baby fussing in someone's arms, an older boy reading a book with a dinosaur on the cover. The chairs were mismatched, the kind you'd find at a thrift store, and there was a water cooler in the corner that made a loud gurgling noise every few minutes. Simon sat with Lily curled up against his side, her head resting on his shoulder. She was holding a stuffed rabbit she'd insisted on bringing, one ear chewed up from years of use. He checked his phone, responded to an email, glanced at the clock on the wall that was running 3 minutes slow. A door opened. Lily Watson. The voice was calm, professional, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who'd said 1,000 names in 1,000 waiting rooms. Simon stood helping Lily to her feet and turned toward the hallway, and then he saw her. Addison. For a second, maybe less, the world went completely silent. No kids, no noise, no anything, just her standing in the doorway with a clipboard in her hands and that same light brown hair pulled back the way she used to wear it. She looked older, not much, but enough. The kind of older that comes with years, not age. Her eyes met his. He watched her face change. Not dramatically. Just a flicker. Recognition, shock, something she tried to swallow down fast. Her grip on the clipboard tightened. Her mouth opened like she was about to say something, then didn't. Lily tugged on his hand. "Dad?" Simon blinked, forced himself back into the moment. "Yeah, come on." They followed Addison down the hall. She didn't look back. The exam room was small. There was a paper-covered table, a rolling stool, a poster on the wall about hand-washing. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed faintly, the kind of sound you didn't notice until everything else went quiet. Addison set the clipboard down on the counter, her movements deliberate, controlled. She turned to Lily with a smile that looked genuine. Maybe it was. "Hi, Lily. I'm Dr. Henderson. How are you feeling today?" Lily climbed onto the table, still clutching her rabbit. "My tummy hurts and my head." "Okay. We're going to figure out what's going on, all right?" Addison's voice was steady, professional. She pulled on a pair of gloves, asked questions about symptoms, checked Lily's temperature with a forehead thermometer that beeped twice. She listened to her heart, looked in her ears, pressed gently on her stomach. Every movement was practiced, efficient, kind. Simon stood against the wall, arms crossed, watching. He didn't know what to do with his hands, didn't know where to look. He kept thinking he should say something, anything, but every possible sentence felt wrong. Addison didn't look at him. Not once, not directly. "Looks like a mild virus," she said finally, pulling off the gloves and tossing them in the trash. "Nothing serious, plenty of fluids, rest, and it should clear up in a few days. If the fever goes above 102 or she starts vomiting, give us a call." "Okay." Simon's voice came out rougher than he meant it to. "Thanks." Addison nodded. She turned to wash her hands at the small sink in the corner, the water running longer than it needed to. When she turned back, she was holding a sticker sheet, cartoon animals wearing doctor coats. She handed it to Lily. "You did great." Lily grinned, peeling off a giraffe and sticking it to her shirt. Addison finally looked at Simon, just for a second, just long enough for him to see that whatever she was feeling, she wasn't going to say it here. Not now. Not in front of his daughter. "Take care," she said quietly. And then she was gone. Simon sat in his car in the clinic parking lot for 10 minutes after they left. Lily was in the back seat, playing with her rabbit, humming a song he didn't recognize. The engine was running, the heat was on. He had 3 missed calls on his phone. He didn't move. His hands were still gripping the steering wheel. Addison. He hadn't seen her in over a decade, hadn't thought about her in... Well, that was a lie. He'd thought about her, more than he should have, more than he'd ever admit. But thinking was different from seeing. Thinking was something you could control. Seeing her standing in that doorway, calling his daughter's name, holding a clipboard like the last 12 years hadn't happened. That he couldn't control. He pulled out of the parking lot slowly, turning onto the street that led back toward the highway. The trees lining the road were starting to turn, gold and orange and red. October in Portland. Beautiful in a way that felt almost cruel. Lily asked if they could stop for ice cream. Simon said yes. He didn't taste a single bite. Addison made it through the rest of her appointments on autopilot. She smiled at the right times, asked the right questions, wrote prescriptions in handwriting that was steady, even though her hands wanted to shake. By the time the last patient left at 5:30, the clinic felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that made it impossible not to think. She sat at her desk in the small office she shared with 2 other doctors, staring at the computer screen without really seeing it. Patient notes, lab results, a reminder about updating insurance codes. None of it registered. Simon. Simon Watson. She hadn't said his name out loud in years, hadn't let herself. It was easier that way, to pretend he was just someone she used to know, back when she was younger and stupider, and thought love was enough to build a life on. But seeing him today standing in that waiting room with a child holding his hand, that wasn't something she could pretend away. She did the math without meaning to. Lily was 6, maybe 6.5, which meant Simon had gotten married. 7 years ago? 8. Right around the time he'd called off their engagement. Right around the time he'd told her he wasn't ready, that he needed space, that maybe they'd rushed into things too fast. She'd waited. Like an idiot, she'd waited. Thinking he'd come back. Thinking he'd realize he'd made a mistake. He hadn't come back. He'd married someone else. Addison closed the patient file on her screen without saving it. She grabbed her bag, turned off the lights, and locked the office door behind her. The hallway was empty. The waiting room was dark. She could hear the building settling, the radiator ticking as it cooled down. Outside, the October air was sharp and cold, the kind of cold that cut through your jacket and made you walk faster. The parking lot was nearly empty. Just her Subaru and a Honda that belonged to the receptionist, who always stayed late to finish paperwork. Streetlights flickered on as the sky turned purple. Addison sat in her car for a long time before starting the engine. She stopped at the grocery store on the way home because her fridge was basically empty, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd cooked an actual meal. The store was one of those Portland places that sold organic everything and had a bulk section where people brought their own mason jars. It smelled like fresh bread and coffee beans. She grabbed a basket and wandered through the aisles without a list. Pasta, tomatoes, a bag of spinach that she'd probably let go bad. She stood in front of the wine section longer than she should have, staring at rows of bottles she couldn't tell apart, before finally grabbing a cheap Pinot Noir and moving on. At the checkout, the cashier was a kid who couldn't have been older than 20, with a nose ring and a name tag that said River. He scanned her items without looking up, humming along to whatever was playing through the store speakers. "You find everything okay?" "Yeah, thanks." "Cool. Your total's 34.62. She handed him her card, waited. The machine beeped. River handed her the receipt and went back to humming. Addison walked out into the parking lot, carrying 2 paper bags that were heavier than they looked. The Honda Civic next to her had a bumper sticker that said, "Keep Portland Weird." She'd seen that sticker 1,000 times. Tonight it felt almost funny. Almost. Her apartment was cold when she got home. She dropped the groceries on the kitchen counter, kicked off her shoes, and turned on the space heater in the corner that rattled when it worked. The place was exactly how she'd left it that morning. Coffee mug in the sink, a book open on the couch, the blanket she'd used last night still bunched up on the armrest. She poured herself a glass of wine, didn't bother with dinner. The couch was old and lumpy in all the wrong places. But she curled up in the corner anyway, pulling the blanket over her legs. Her phone sat on the coffee table face down. 3 texts from her friend Jenna, asking if she wanted to meet up this weekend. A reminder about her dentist appointment. A notification from her bank about her credit card balance. She didn't open any of them. Instead, she sat there in the half-dark, sipping wine that tasted like nothing, thinking about a man she hadn't seen in 12 years. She'd been 20 when they met. A junior in college, pre-med, running on caffeine and 4 hours of sleep a night. He'd been older, 29, already working in logistics, already successful in a way that made her feel like maybe she could be too. They'd met at a coffee shop near campus, one of those encounters that happened by accident. He'd grabbed her drink by mistake, apologized, bought her a replacement, and somehow they'd ended up talking for 2 hours. It had felt easy. That was the thing she remembered most. How easy it all was. They dated for 3 years. He proposed on a weekend trip to the coast, kneeling in the sand while the ocean roared behind him, and the ring box got covered in grit. She'd said yes without hesitating. She'd started planning a wedding. She'd imagined a whole life. And then, 6 months before the date, he'd called it off. Not in person, not face to face, over the phone. "I can't do this," he'd said. His voice had been flat, distant, like he was reading from a script. "I'm not ready. I thought I was, but I'm not." She'd asked him what that meant, if it was something she'd done, if there was someone else. He'd said no. He'd said it wasn't her fault. He'd said he just needed time. She'd believed him. 2 months later, she'd seen the engagement photos on Facebook. Him and a woman she'd never heard of, standing in front of a fireplace, smiling like they'd been together forever. Addison finished her wine, poured another glass. The next morning she woke up with a headache and the taste of regret in her mouth. The wine bottle sat empty on the counter. Sunlight streamed through the blinds she'd forgotten to close. Her phone said it was 7:18 a.m. She had 30 minutes to get to work. She showered fast, pulled her hair back while it was still wet, threw on the first clean pair of scrubs she could find. No breakfast, just coffee in a to-go mug that she burned her tongue on in the car. Traffic on Hawthorne was worse than usual, some kind of accident near 39th that had everything backed up. By the time she pulled into the clinic parking lot, she was 15 minutes late. The receptionist gave her a look when she walked in. Rough night? Something like that. Well, your first appointment's already here. Exam room 1. Addison nodded, dropping her bag in the office and grabbing the chart from the rack outside the door. She glanced at the name, Lily Watson, follow-up. Her stomach dropped. She stood there in the hallway staring at the name on the paper, feeling her pulse kick up in her chest. It had been 3 days since the first appointment. 3 days, and she'd managed to convince herself that she'd never see them again, that it had been a one-time thing, a cosmic joke that was over now. She should have known better. Addison took a breath, straightened her shoulders, pushed open the door. Simon was sitting in the chair against the wall, phone in hand, looking like he hadn't slept much either. He glanced up when she walked in. Their eyes met. Neither of them said anything. Lily was on the exam table, swinging her legs, holding the same stuffed rabbit from before. She smiled when she saw Addison. "Hi, Dr. Henderson." "Hi, Lily." Addison's voice came out steadier than she felt. "How are you feeling?" "Better. My tummy doesn't hurt anymore." "That's great. Let's take a look, okay?" She went through the motions, temperature, heart rate, checked her ears, her throat, asked about appetite, energy, sleep. Lily talked the whole time about her school, her teacher, the new friend she'd made at recess who had a dog named Biscuit. Addison listened, nodded, smiled in the right places. Simon didn't say a word. When the exam was done, Addison pulled off her gloves and typed notes into the computer. "Everything looks good. She's all clear." "Thanks." His voice was quiet, careful, like he was trying not to say too much. Lily hopped down from the table. "Can I go look at the toys?" Simon hesitated, then nodded. "Stay in the waiting room." "I will." She ran out, the door swinging shut behind her. And then it was just the two of them. The silence stretched. Addison kept typing, even though she'd already finished the notes. Simon stood up, hands in his pockets, looking like he wanted to say something but couldn't figure out how to start. Finally, he did. "Addison." She stopped typing, didn't turn around. "I didn't know you were here. In Portland. Why would you?" She closed the laptop, turned to face him. "It's been 12 years, Simon." He flinched. "I know." "Do you?" The words came out sharper than she meant them to. She saw him absorb it, saw the guilt flicker across his face. Good. She wanted him to feel it. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what? For leaving? For lying? For showing up here with a kid who's the same age as the life we were supposed to have?" His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Addison grabbed the chart off the counter. "Your daughter's fine. You're all set." She moved toward the door. "Addison, wait." She stopped, hand on the doorknob, didn't look back. "Please," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" "Not here. Somewhere else." She turned her head just enough to see him. He looked older up close, tired, like he'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. "There's nothing to talk about." "I think there is." "Well, I don't." She opened the door, stepped out into the hallway. Behind her she heard him exhale, slow, defeated. The door closed. Simon sat in his office on the 18th floor of a building downtown, staring at a spreadsheet that might as well have been written in another language. Numbers blurred together, columns didn't make sense. He'd been looking at the same screen for 20 minutes and hadn't absorbed a single thing. The view from his window stretched across the Willamette River, bridges arcing over dark water, the West Hills rising green and dense in the distance. It was the kind of view people paid extra for, the kind that was supposed to make you feel successful. He felt nothing. His assistant knocked twice before opening the door. "Your 3 o'clock's here." Simon glanced at the clock on his computer. It was 3:07. "Give me 5 minutes." "Sure." The door closed again. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes with the heels of his hands. He hadn't slept well in days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Addison standing in that exam room, her face carefully blank, her voice cold in a way that hurt more than if she'd yelled. There's nothing to talk about. Maybe she was right. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe the smartest thing to do was stay away, let her live her life, stop dragging the past into her present. But he couldn't shake the look on her face when she'd asked how old Lily was, the way she'd done the math, the way she'd realized, probably in that exact moment, that he'd moved on while she was still waiting for an explanation that never came. He'd been a coward, he knew that. He'd known it then too, but he'd convinced himself he was doing the right thing, that he wasn't ready for marriage, that he was too young, too focused on work, too unsure, that Addison deserved better than someone who wasn't 100% certain. And then he'd met Rachel, who was older, more settled, who didn't ask for promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Rachel, who was practical and patient and didn't mind that he worked 70-hour weeks. They'd dated for 6 months before getting engaged, married 3 months after that. Lily was born a year later. He told himself it was different, that it was the right timing, that he'd grown up. But the truth he'd never said out loud, was that marrying Rachel had felt safer, easier, less like jumping off a cliff and hoping someone would catch him. And now Rachel was gone. And Addison was back in his life like some kind of reckoning he wasn't ready for, and he didn't know how to fix any of it. His phone buzzed. A text from the nanny. "Lily's asking about the doctor again. Said she liked her. Just FYI." Simon stared at the message. Of course Lily liked her. Addison was good with kids, kind, patient, the kind of person who made people feel safe. She'd probably be an amazing mother someday. Maybe she already was. Maybe she had a whole family he didn't know about. A husband, kids of her own. The thought made his chest tighten. He pocketed his phone and stood up. He had a meeting to get to, numbers to review, decisions to make. He was good at that, making decisions, solving problems, keeping everything running smoothly. Everything except his own life. Addison was having lunch alone in the break room when Jenna walked in. Jenna was an ER nurse at the hospital across town, one of those people who never seemed tired no matter how many double shifts she worked. She had short, dark hair, a nose ring, and an opinion about everything. "You look like hell," Jenna said, dropping into the chair across from her. "Thanks. You always know what to say." "Seriously, what's going on? You've been dodging my texts all week." Addison poked at her salad. Mostly lettuce, a few sad cherry tomatoes, dressing she'd forgotten to add. "Nothing. Just busy." "Liar." Jenna leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Come on, talk to me." Addison set down her fork, looked at her friend. Jenna had been there through everything. Through the breakup, through med school, through every bad date and worst decision. If anyone deserved the truth, it was her. "I saw Simon." Jenna blinked. "Simon? As in?" "Yeah." "Holy shit." "He brought his daughter to the clinic. She's 6. Jenna's face changed. She'd always been quick. She did the math instantly. Oh, Addie. Don't. I mean it. Don't do the sympathy thing. I'm fine." "You're clearly not fine." Addison pushed her salad away. "He wants to talk. I told him no." "Why? Why? Are you serious? What's there to talk about? He dumped me, married someone else, had a kid, and now he's back acting like we should just, what, catch up, pretend the last 12 years didn't happen." Jenna was quiet for a moment. "Is his wife dead 2 years ago?" "Jesus, I know." They sat in silence. The break room was small, sterile, the kind of place that smelled like microwaved leftovers and burnt coffee. Someone had taped a motivational poster to the wall that said, Teamwork makes the dream work, with a picture of dolphins jumping through hoops. Addison hated that poster. "So what are you going to do?" Jenna asked finally. "Nothing. I'm going to keep my head down, do my job, and hope they find a different pediatrician." "You don't mean that." "Yes, I do." Jenna reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Addie, I get it. I do. But maybe. I don't know. Maybe hearing what he has to say wouldn't be the worst thing. It would, actually." "How do you know?" "Because I already know what he's going to say. That he's sorry, that he was young and stupid, that he didn't mean to hurt me. And none of it's going to change anything, Jen. It's not going to give me back the years I spent wondering what I did wrong. It's not going to make me stop feeling like an idiot every time I think about how long I waited for him to come back." Her voice cracked on the last word. Jenna didn't say anything, just held her hand. After a minute, Addison pulled away, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I gotta get back to work." "You sure?" "Yeah." She stood up, grabbing her salad container even though she hadn't eaten half of it. At the door, she paused. "Jen? Yeah?" "Thanks." Jenna smiled. "Anytime." That night, Addison did something she hadn't done in years. She opened the boxes in the back of her closet. There were 3 of them, taped shut, labeled in her own handwriting from over a decade ago. She'd moved them from apartment to apartment, city to city, always telling herself she'd go through them eventually, always finding a reason not to. Tonight she didn't have a reason, or maybe she had too many. She sat on the floor of her bedroom, the boxes arranged in front of her like accusers. The carpet was thin, worn in places where furniture used to sit. The overhead light buzzed faintly. She opened the first box. Photos. Dozens of them. Printed back when people still did that. Her and Simon at a farmer's market, both of them laughing at something she couldn't remember. Her and Simon on a hiking trail, his arm around her shoulders. Mountains in the background. Her and Simon in his old apartment, the one with the kitchen that was too small and the bathroom that always smelled like mildew. She flipped through them slowly, each one a small knife. The second box had letters, cards, stupid notes he'd left on her dashboard or tucked into her textbooks. "Thinking about you. S. Good luck on your exam. You're gonna kill it. Can't wait to see you tonight." She almost closed the box, almost taped it back up and shoved it in the closet where it belonged. But she didn't. The third box was the worst. It had the ring. Not the engagement ring. She'd given that back when he called things off. But the promise ring he'd given her before that. A simple silver band with a tiny stone that probably cost him a month's rent. She'd worn it every day for 2 years. She pulled it out now, holding it up to the light. It looked smaller than she remembered. Cheaper. Like something a kid would buy. She'd been a kid. They both had been. Addison sat there on the floor, surrounded by pieces of a life that never happened, and let herself cry. Not the angry kind of crying, not the kind that came with screaming or throwing things, just the quiet kind. The kind that came from finally letting go of something you'd been holding onto for too long. When she was done, she put everything back in the boxes, taped them shut, carried them to the dumpster outside her building and threw them in. She didn't look back. The next morning, Addison walked into the clinic and found a coffee on her desk. Not from the break room, from the good place 2 blocks over, the one with the oat milk and the baristas who remembered your order. There was a note next to it, written on the back of a patient reminder card. "I know you don't want to talk, but if you change your mind, I'll be at Powell's on Saturday. 2 p.m., the coffee shop on the 3rd floor, no pressure. S." She read it twice. Then she crumpled it up and threw it away. The coffee sat there, still warm. Saturday came whether Addison wanted it to or not. She told herself she wasn't going. Told herself all morning while she drank coffee and stared at her laptop, pretending to catch up on medical journals she wasn't actually reading. Told herself while she did laundry, folding the same shirt 3 times because she kept forgetting she'd already done it. Told herself while she stood in the shower until the water ran cold. At 1:47 p.m., she was pulling into the parking garage near Powell's. She sat in her car for 5 minutes, engine off, keys in her lap. The garage smelled like exhaust and concrete. Someone's alarm was going off 3 floors up. She could still leave. She could drive home, pour herself a glass of wine, watch something mindless on Netflix and pretend this whole week had never happened. But she'd thrown away the boxes. She'd cried on her bedroom floor. She'd spent 12 years wondering. Maybe it was time to stop wondering. She grabbed her purse and got out of the car. Powell's City of Books took up an entire city block in the Pearl District. A maze of rooms color-coded by genre, stacked floor to ceiling with new and used books that smelled like paper and possibility. Addison had always loved this place. Back in college, she'd spent whole afternoons here, hiding in the aisles with a stack of novels she'd never buy, just reading until her back hurt from sitting on the floor. The coffee shop was on the 3rd floor, tucked into a corner near the poetry section. Small tables, mismatched chairs, a chalkboard menu that listed drinks with names like the Bronte and the Hemingway. It was crowded. People with laptops, people with books, people who looked like they'd been sitting there for hours and had no plans to leave. Simon was at a table by the window. He saw her before she saw him. She knew because when she finally spotted him, he was already watching her, coffee cup halfway to his mouth, something unreadable on his face. Addison almost turned around, almost walked back down the stairs and out the door and pretended she'd never come. But he'd seen her, and she was tired of running. She walked over. He stood up when she got close. "You came. Don't make a big thing out of it." "I won't." She sat down. He sat down. There was a coffee waiting for her, the same kind he'd left at the clinic. She didn't touch it. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Outside the window, the street was full of people, tourists with cameras, locals on bikes, someone playing guitar on the corner for tips. Life happening, normal and loud and completely indifferent to the two of them sitting in this coffee shop, trying to figure out how to talk to each other. Simon spoke first. "I didn't think you'd actually show." "I didn't either. What changed your mind?" Addison looked at him, really looked at him. He was older, yeah. Lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, grey starting at his temples, the kind of tired that came from more than just lack of sleep. But he was still Simon. Same jawline, same way of sitting with his shoulders slightly hunched, same hands that used to reach for hers without thinking. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe I'm just tired of carrying this around." He nodded, like he understood, like maybe he'd been carrying it too. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "You owed me that 12 years ago." "I know." She waited. He took a breath. "I was terrified," he said quietly. "Of you, of us, of the whole thing. We were so young, Addie. I was 29 and you were barely out of college, and we were talking about forever like we actually knew what that meant. I knew what it meant. Yeah, you did. That's what scared me. You were so sure, about everything, about me. And I kept thinking, what if I wasn't enough? What if I couldn't be what you needed? What if I screwed it up and you wasted your whole life on me?" Addison's hands were shaking. She put them in her lap. "So you decided to screw it up first?" "Yeah, I guess I did." "And Rachel?" His face changed, grief, sharp and sudden. "Rachel was different. She didn't expect anything from me. Didn't need me to be more than I was. It felt safer." "Did you love her?" The question came out before she could stop it. She didn't know if she wanted the answer. Simon was quiet for a long time. "Yeah, I did. Just not the way I loved you." Something cracked open in her chest. She looked away, blinking hard. "She knew," he continued. "Rachel. She knew she wasn't my first choice. We never talked about it, but she knew. And she married me anyway. She gave me a daughter. She built a life with me. And when she died..." He stopped, swallowed. "When she died, all I could think was that she deserved better, that I'd cheated her out of something by not being all in." "Simon, I'm not telling you this for sympathy," he said quickly. "I'm telling you because you deserve to know the truth, all of it. I made choices, bad ones, selfish ones. And I hurt you. I hurt Rachel. I hurt everyone because I was too much of a coward to be honest with myself about what I actually wanted." Addison stared at the untouched coffee in front of her. The foam had already dissolved into the surface, turning it brown and unappealing. Outside, the guitar player finished his song. Someone clapped. "What do you want now?" she asked. "I don't know." He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I don't know if I have the right to want anything, but I guess I want you to not hate me. I want Lily to have a good doctor. I want to stop feeling like I'm drowning every time I see you." He paused. "And I want to stop wondering if I made the biggest mistake of my life when I let you go." Her breath caught. "I'm not asking for anything," he added quickly. "I'm not asking you to forgive me or give me another chance or any of that. I just needed you to know, that's all." The coffee shop felt too small suddenly, too warm, too full of people who weren't them. Addison stood up. "Where are you?" "I need air." She walked toward the stairs, past shelves of books she didn't see, past people she didn't register. Her heart was pounding in her ears. Her hands were still shaking. She needed out. She needed space. She needed to think without him sitting 3 feet away looking at her like she was something precious he'd lost. She made it to the first floor before he caught up with her. "Addison, wait." She spun around. "You don't get to do this." "Do what?" "Show up after 12 years and tell me you made a mistake. That you loved me more than you loved her. That you wonder about what could have been. You don't get to put that on me, Simon. I'm not trying to—" "Yes, you are. You're trying to make yourself feel better, to clear your conscience or whatever. But you know what? I don't care. I don't care that you were scared. I don't care that you didn't think you were enough, because I thought you were enough. I was ready to spend my whole life proving it to you, and you threw that away." People were staring. She didn't care. "I waited for you," she said, her voice breaking. "I waited months. I turned down dates. I told my friends you'd come back. I made excuses for you, and the whole time you were with someone else, building the life we were supposed to have." "I know." His voice was rough. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry, Addison." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Sorry doesn't fix it." "I know that, too." They stood there in the middle of the bookstore, surrounded by stories about other people's lives, their own story hanging unfinished between them. Finally, Addison took a breath. "I need time to process this, to figure out what I'm even feeling. I can't do that with you standing here looking at me like that." Okay. Yeah, take whatever time you need. I'll stay away. I'll find Lily a different doctor if that's easier." "No." The word came out before she'd thought it through. "No, don't do that. She likes me. Kids need consistency." "Are you sure?" "I'm a professional, Simon. I can keep it together for a 6-year-old's checkups." A small smile tugged at his mouth. "I know you can." She turned to go. "Addison?" She looked back. "Thank you for coming today, for listening." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and walked away. Outside, the October air was crisp and clean, cutting through the fog in her head. She walked without direction, past cafes and boutiques and galleries she'd been to 100 times. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, probably Jenna checking in. She ignored it. She walked for blocks, past the park where people were flying kites, past the food carts where the smell of pad thai and tacos mixed in the air, past the bridge where runners jogged in bright athletic gear. Eventually, she found herself at the river. She sat on a bench facing the water. The Willamette moved slow and dark, reflecting the grey sky. A few boats drifted by. Seagulls fought over something near the shore. She'd come to Portland to start over. New city, new job, new life. Away from memories and ghosts and the weight of what might have been. But the past had found her anyway. She pulled out her phone, opened her messages, stared at Jenna's name for a long time before finally typing. "I saw him. We talked. I don't know what I'm feeling." The response came almost immediately. "Come over. I have wine and terrible reality TV." Addison smiled despite everything. "Give me an hour." She put the phone away, sat there a little longer watching the water. The coffee shop receipt was still in her jacket pocket. She pulled it out, smoothing it flat on her knee. Simon had written his number on the back under the words, "In case you need anything." She folded it carefully, put it back in her pocket. She wasn't ready to throw it away. 3 weeks passed. Addison threw herself into work. Double shifts, extra appointments. She volunteered to cover for the other doctors when they needed time off. Anything to keep her mind occupied, to fill the hours with something other than the conversation that kept replaying in her head. I loved you more than I loved her. She'd told Jenna about it over wine and bad reality TV, just like promised. Jenna had listened, made all the right sympathetic noises, and then said something that Addison couldn't stop thinking about. You know what the worst part is? He was honest. Finally. After all this time, he told you the truth, and now you have to figure out what to do with it. That was the problem. Addison didn't know what to do with it. She saw Simon once during those 3 weeks, in passing at the clinic. He was picking Lily up from a sick visit with one of the other pediatricians. Apparently he'd kept his word about giving Addison space. They'd made eye contact across the waiting room. He'd nodded, she'd nodded back. That was it. But she'd felt it for hours afterward. That pull, that awareness. Like her body remembered something her brain was still trying to forget. At night, she'd lie awake in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of their relationship, trying to figure out where it had gone wrong, trying to understand how someone could love you and leave you at the same time. And every time she came back to the same question: what now? On a Thursday afternoon in early November, Addison was finishing up paperwork when the receptionist poked her head into the office. "Hey, Dr. Henderson, there's someone here to see you, says it's personal." Addison's stomach dropped. "Who?" "A little girl, Lily Watson. She's with her nanny." Addison set down her pen. "Send them in." A minute later, Lily walked into the office, holding the hand of a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a bun. Lily was wearing a purple jacket and light-up sneakers that blinked when she walked. "Hi, Dr. Henderson," Lily said, waving. "Hi, Lily." Addison smiled despite her confusion. "What brings you here?" The nanny, her name tag said Margaret, looked apologetic. "I'm so sorry to bother you." Lily insisted. She wanted to give you something. Lily pulled a folded piece of paper from her jacket pocket and held it out. "I made you a picture." Addison took it, unfolding it carefully. It was a crayon drawing. A stick figure woman in a white coat with brown hair, standing next to a smaller stick figure holding what looked like a rabbit. The sun was bright yellow in the corner. There were flowers, lots of flowers. "That's you," Lily explained, pointing at the taller figure. "And that's me, and that's Mr. Hoppy." "Mr. Hoppy, my rabbit, you remember him, right?" "Of course I do." Addison's throat felt tight. "This is beautiful, Lily. Thank you." "You're welcome. You're my favorite doctor." Margaret squeezed Lily's shoulder gently. "All right, sweetheart, we should let Dr. Henderson get back to work." "Okay." Lily looked up at Addison. "Will you put it on your wall?" "Absolutely." "Promise?" "Promise." Lily grinned, showing the gap in her front teeth, and followed Margaret out of the office. Addison stood there holding the drawing, feeling something shift inside her chest. This wasn't about Simon. This was about a 6-year-old girl who'd just lost her mother 2 years ago and was trying to find people to trust, people to care about. Addison taped the drawing to the wall next to her desk, right where she'd see it every day. That night she did something she hadn't planned on doing. She texted Simon. "Lily came by the office today. She brought me a drawing. The response came 10 minutes later. I didn't know she was going to do that. Margaret said she insisted. I hope it wasn't weird." "It wasn't weird. It was sweet." A pause. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "She talks about you a lot. Says you're nice." Addison stared at the message, typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, "She's a great kid. She is. I got lucky." Another pause. Then, "How are you?" Addison set the phone down, picked it back up, put it down again. This was how it started, wasn't it? The slow slide back into something she'd promised herself she wouldn't do, but she'd kept his number. She'd kept the receipt. She'd been thinking about him for 3 weeks straight. Maybe she was already sliding. "I'm okay, busy, yeah, me too." She waited to see if he'd say more. He didn't, so she typed, "The drawing's on my wall, next to my diplomas. That'll make her happy. Simon? Yeah?" She hesitated. Then, "I don't know what I'm doing." The 3 dots appeared immediately. "Neither do I. But maybe we don't have to figure it out all at once." Addison read the message 3 times, then, maybe not. Coffee sometime? No pressure, just coffee. She thought about Powell's, about the conversation that had broken her open and put her back together slightly different than before, about the fact that she was tired of being angry, tired of wondering, tired of carrying this weight alone. So yeah, okay, coffee. They met on Sunday morning at a place in Selwood, a neighborhood coffee shop with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. It was raining, the kind of soft, constant Portland rain that didn't stop anyone from doing anything, just made them bring jackets. Simon was already there when she arrived, sitting at a table by the window with 2 cups in front of him. He stood when he saw her. "I got you an oat milk latte," he said. "I remember you hated regular milk." "You remember that?" "I remember a lot of things." They sat down. The coffee was good. The rain made patterns on the window. Neither of them seemed to know where to start. Finally, Simon said, "Tell me about your life, the last 12 years. I want to know." So she did. She told him about med school, about residency, about the decision to specialize in pediatrics, about moving to Seattle for a few years, then to Portland, about the apartment with the creaky floors and the plants she kept forgetting to water, about Jenna, about the terrible dates she'd been on, about the life she'd built that was good. Maybe not what she'd imagined, but good. He listened, really listened, asked questions, laughed at the right parts. And when she was done, he told her about his life too, about building the company, about Rachel, about Lily, about trying to be a single father and feeling like he was failing most days, even when people told him he was doing fine. "She asks about her mom," he said quietly. "Not all the time, but sometimes. Usually at night, when I'm tucking her in. And I never know what to say. How do you explain death to a 6-year-old? You just tell her the truth, that her mom loved her, that it's okay to miss her, that missing someone doesn't go away, but it gets easier to carry." He looked at her. "Is that what happened with us? Did it get easier to carry?" Addison thought about the boxes she'd thrown away, about the nights she'd cried, about the years she'd spent angry and hurt and confused. Eventually, but it took a long time. "I'm sorry it took so long." "Me too." They talked for 2 hours, about nothing, about everything. It wasn't a date. They both seemed to understand that without saying it. It was just 2 people who used to know each other, trying to figure out if they still could. When they left, the rain had stopped. The sidewalk was wet and shiny, reflecting the grey sky. Simon walked her to her car, hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold. "Can we do this again?" he asked. "The coffee? Yeah. Or, I don't know. Whatever this is." Addison looked at him, at the way he was trying not to seem too hopeful, at the way he'd shown up, been honest, given her space when she needed it. "Yeah," she said, "we can do this again." Relief flickered across his face. "Okay, good." She unlocked her car, got in. He stepped back, giving her room. As she started the engine, he knocked on her window. She rolled it down. "Hey, Addison?" "Yeah? Thank you for giving me a chance to try again." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just smiled, put the car in reverse, drove away without looking back. That night, Lily asked Simon a question. They were sitting at the kitchen table, eating mac and cheese from a box, because Simon had forgotten to go grocery shopping again. Lily was drawing on a piece of paper, humming to herself. "Dad?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" "Do you like Dr. Henderson?" Simon's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "What?" "Dr. Henderson, do you like her?" Yeah, she's a good doctor." "No, I mean like her." He set down his fork. "Why are you asking?" Lily looked up, her expression serious, in that way kids got sometimes, when they saw more than you thought they could. "Because you smile different when you talk about her, like how you used to smile when you looked at pictures of Mom." Something in Simon's chest cracked open. "Is it okay?" Lily asked quietly. "If you like her?" He reached across the table, taking her small hand in his. "Do you think it's okay?" She thought about it. "I think Mom would want you to be happy." "Yeah?" "Yeah." She squeezed his hand. "And I like Dr. Henderson. She's nice, and she kept my drawing." Simon felt his eyes sting. She did, huh? Uh-huh. So I think it's okay. He pulled her into a hug, holding her tight against his chest. This kid, this impossibly wise, impossibly kind kid who'd been through so much and was still trying to take care of him. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "I love you too, Dad." They finished dinner, did the dishes together, read 2 chapters of the book they'd been working through. And when he tucked her into bed, she looked up at him with her mother's eyes and said, "Don't mess it up this time, okay?" He laughed, despite himself. "I'll try my best. Promise?" "Promise." She fell asleep, holding Mr. Hoppy. Simon stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her breathe. Then he went downstairs and texted Addison. "She asked if I liked you." "What did you say?" "I said you were a good doctor. Smooth." She didn't buy it either. A pause, then, "For the record, I like you too." Simon stared at the message, read it 5 times, felt something he hadn't felt in years settle warm in his chest. "Yeah?" "Yeah. Don't make me regret admitting it, I won't." He meant it. 18 months later. The clinic hadn't changed much. Same creaky radiator, same crack in the ceiling of exam room 2, same bin of toys in the waiting room that kids still fought over. But when Addison walked through the door each morning now, something felt different. Lighter, maybe. Like she'd finally stopped carrying something she didn't need anymore. It was a Saturday afternoon in May, one of those rare perfect Portland days where the sun was out and the air smelled like flowers and cut grass. Addison had just finished her last appointment of the week when her phone buzzed. "We're outside." She smiled, grabbing her bag and her keys. In the parking lot, Simon's BMW was parked in the shade of a maple tree, windows down, music playing softly through the speakers. Lily was in the back seat, already unbuckling herself, practically bouncing with excitement. "Dr. Henderson." She hopped out of the car, running over. "Guess what?" "What?" "We're going to the park, and Dad says we can get ice cream after, and you're coming." Addison laughed, catching Lily in a hug. "Am I?" "You are," Simon said, walking around from the driver's side. He was wearing jeans and a grey t-shirt, casual in a way he never used to be, and his hair was slightly too long, like he kept forgetting to get it cut. He looked good, relaxed, happy. He looked at her the way he used to, 12 years ago, like she was the best thing he'd seen all day. "I thought we could make a day of it," he said. "If you're not too tired." "I'm never too tired for ice cream." Lily grabbed her hand, already pulling her toward the car. "You have to sit in the back with me. I made a list of all the flavors I want to try." "A list? How many flavors are we talking?" "Like 10. 10? Okay, maybe 7. But that's my final offer." Simon caught Addison's eye over Lily's head, shaking his head with a grin. "She's been planning this all week. I can tell." They drove to Laurelhurst Park, windows down, Lily singing along to whatever was on the radio. Simon's hand rested on the console between them, and halfway there, Addison reached over and laced her fingers through his. He glanced at her, surprised, then smiled and squeezed gently. It had taken time to get here. Months of coffee dates and careful conversations. Months of learning to trust again, to let someone in without constantly waiting for them to leave. There had been hard moments, nights when old fears crept back in, moments when Addison wondered if she was being stupid, if she was setting herself up to get hurt all over again. But Simon had been patient, consistent. He'd shown up when he said he would. He'd been honest when things were hard. He'd let her set the pace, never pushing, never asking for more than she was ready to give. And slowly, carefully, they'd built something new. Not a continuation of what they'd had before, but something different, something stronger, maybe, because it was built on truth instead of hope. The park was crowded with families, kids on swings, dogs chasing frisbees, couples lying on blankets in the grass. Lily ran ahead to the playground, her light-up sneakers flashing with every step. Simon and Addison found a bench near the swings, close enough to keep an eye on Lily, but far enough to have their own conversation. "She's getting tall," Addison said, watching Lily climb the ladder to the slide. "I know, I keep having to buy new clothes. She grows out of everything in like 3 months. That's how kids work." "Yeah, well, nobody warned me it'd be this expensive." Addison laughed, Wait until she's a teenager, then you'll really be in trouble. Simon groaned. Don't remind me, I'm not ready for that. You've got a few years. Not enough. They sat in comfortable silence for a while watching Lily play. She'd made friends with another girl on the monkey bars, and they were taking turns seeing who could hang on longer. She asked about you this morning, Simon said quietly. Yeah? What did she say? She wanted to know if you were going to move in with us. Addison's breath caught. Oh. I told her we weren't there yet, that these things take time. He glanced at her. That was the right answer, right? Yeah, that was the right answer. But maybe. Not the forever answer? She looked at him, at the way he was trying to seem casual about it, even though she could see the hope in his eyes. The same hope she'd seen 12 years ago when he'd proposed on a beach with sand in the ring box. But this time was different. This time they both knew what they were risking, what they stood to lose, and they were choosing it anyway. Maybe not the forever answer, she said softly. His smile was slow and genuine. Okay, good. But Simon. Yeah? I need you to promise me something. Anything. If you ever get scared again, if you ever feel like you're not enough or you start doubting this, you talk to me, you don't run. You don't make decisions without me, we figure it out together. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. I promise. I swear to God, Addison, I'm not going anywhere. Not this time. Not ever. You better mean that. I do. She believed him, not because she was naive, but because he'd earned it. Day by day, choice by choice, he'd shown her that he meant it. Lily ran over, out of breath and grinning. Ice cream time? Ice cream time, Simon agreed. They went to Salt and Straw, a place that always had a line out the door but was worth the wait. Lily tried 4 flavors before finally settling on honey lavender and strawberry honey balsamic. Addison got pear and blue cheese. Simon went with something called bone marrow with smoked cherry. That sounded disgusting, but actually wasn't bad. They ate their ice cream walking through the Alberta Arts District, looking at murals and street art, stopping to watch a guy playing saxophone on the corner. Lily got ice cream on her shirt. Simon had to carry her the last 3 blocks because her feet hurt. Addison took a picture of them like that. Simon with Lily on his back, both of them laughing about something she couldn't hear. It was perfect in the way normal days could be perfect. Not dramatic, not life-changing, just good. When they got back to Simon's house, Lily was asleep in the car. He carried her inside, and Addison followed, helping get her shoes off and tucking her into bed. Mr. Hoppy was waiting on her pillow, one ear still chewed up after all these years. Downstairs, Simon made coffee even though it was almost evening. They sat on the back porch watching the sun start to set, painting the sky orange and pink and purple. I never thought I'd get this, Simon said quietly. Get what? Another chance. With you. He looked at her. I thought I'd screwed it up for good. You almost did. I know. But you didn't. Because you let me try again. Addison leaned her head on his shoulder. We both tried again. He kissed the top of her head. She closed her eyes, breathing in the smell of him, coffee and laundry detergent and something that was just Simon. This wasn't the life she'd planned 12 years ago. It wasn't the neat, simple story where the boy proposes and the girl says yes and they live happily ever after, without any complications. But it was real. It was honest. And it was theirs. Hey, she said. Yeah? Ask me again. Ask you what? She lifted her head, looking at him. You know what? His eyes widened. Addison, I'm not saying I'm ready right now, but someday, when we're both sure. When Lily's ready, ask me again. Simon's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Are you serious? Yeah, I'm serious. You're not going to regret this. I might, you might, but I think we're worth the risk. He kissed her, slow and soft and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. I love you, he said. I never stopped. I know. I love you too. They sat there as the sun finished setting, as the sky turned dark and stars started appearing, as the porch light came on automatically and moths began circling. Inside, Lily was dreaming. The coffee went cold. The world kept turning. And two people who'd lost each other once found their way back, not to who they used to be, but to who they'd become. Some love stories end when they're supposed to. Others end too soon, messy and painful and unfinished. And then there are the rare ones that get a second chance. Not because they were perfect the first time, but because the people in them learned how to be brave enough to try again. This was one of those stories. Not an ending, just a beginning that took 12 years to arrive. And it was worth the wait. The end. Love doesn't always follow the path we plan. Sometimes it takes detours, wrong turns, years of silence. But when it comes back, when two people decide that the risk is worth taking, that's when it becomes something stronger than it ever could have been the first time. Because second chances aren't about forgetting the past. They're about learning from it and choosing to build something new. Question for you. Do you believe people can truly change and deserve a second chance at love, even after hurting someone deeply? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for spending this time with Addison, Simon, and Lily. If their story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe. There are more heartfelt stories coming your way. Until next time.